All right, welcome to this class on Norman Finkelstein. I have a little bit of a cold or a flu, but yeah, today we're going to be typing Dr. Norman Finkelstein, and he is, um, yeah, a very knowledgeable person. And yeah, as usual, we are not claiming any type accuracy here. But we're going to look through the objective personality system as well as MBTI and kind of see what kind of type we can come up with for this guy. He's a very knowledgeable dude. And yeah, we'll start off as usual with a short recap on the previous person, and then we'll get into video clips for Norman Finkelstein, and then we'll end with a final guess of what his type is, and then yeah, just say who's going to be in the next episode in 2 weeks. These videos are coming out every 2 weeks. This is episode 11. And yeah, let's get started. So last time we talked about Dr. Cornel West. I'm not changing his type for now. It's possible that he could be NETI. His TI is quite good. But I ended up guessing NEFE. I think that he's got quite a good pulse on the tribe of the vibe of where things are going, and he comes off as double masculine to me. Anyway, it was a good episode. I really enjoyed typing Dr. Cornel West, very friendly guy, and by contrast, Norman Finkelstein's going to be a little less friendly, but still, got the probably a specialist as well. So yeah, let's get into it. So my first impression of Norman Finkelstein is that he came off to me like some kind of TI user, possibly an NTP. So that could be an ENTP, like Jordan Peterson and Quentin Tarantino, or it could be an INTP, like Bill Nye and Donald Hoffman. He also looked to me a little bit like Lex Friedman. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to wash off these biases, but that's kind of what I went into the week typing Norman over here. Yeah, so that's just a starting point, but we'll get to know him over some clips. So the first one is going to be with our good friend Candace Owens, who is an ESFP. So we got 5 videos here, and yeah, so the first one is going to be with Candace Owens. Let's get into it. Let's see how he is and what we can kind of get from it. What kind of typology related trait can we see in Norman Finkelstein, who's on the right here? Yeah.
Lex Friedman says, and destiny. I'm wondering, why are you harping on destiny?
This random streamer.
Yeah, it was
so strange.
It was strange. Exactly. It was so strange. I then thought to myself, if I refused, then it would look like I'm afraid to debate Benny Morris, because he's a real senior historian and very smart. He knows his stuff, for sure. And I didn't want that to be broadcast far and wide, Finkelstein afraid to debate Benny Morris. So I said, okay, if he wants to come along with Benny Morris, this thing called destiny, I said, okay, I'll do it. And I said, I'll debate with my good friend, very smart guy, Muin Rabbani, top of the line. And we have the same political outlook. So why do I mention it? A few months later, I'm having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he says to me, Destiny was paid to be on with you. I said, no.
All right. Yeah. So they had this pretty widely watched debate between Norman Finkelstein and Destiny, who is typed as an ENTP. But yeah, it was very interesting to watch that debate. And the thing is, like, according to Norman over here, he has a good source that says Destiny got paid to debate him under the table, basically. Like, it's not really publicly known or advertised that Destiny was getting paid. But anyway, without getting pulled into that, you could kind of hear a little bit of this decider talk. Now, is he still a double decider getting into the people game? Or, is he actually a decider who's saying like, hey, I'm going to debate this person I'm going to refer to as a thing. This is honestly, it's really funny. You see Candace laughing there. The next clip, we're going to get into actual background stuff. We're going to come back to Candace in the third clip, but for now, let's try to dig into a little bit more background on Norman Finkelstein. Of course, he is kind of an expert with, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well as the Holocaust, because, as you're about to hear, and, this is, I guess, a trigger warning, but he's going to talk a little bit about, in this clip, this is from 2002. He's going to talk a little bit about how his family went through the Holocaust. And yeah, this was a really good interview. I'm going to put all the videos of the clips that I'm using. I'm going to put them in the description. So feel free to check those out. But yeah, let's get into some of his background info so we can get that out of the way and we can actually get to the type.
And comparing something that concerns the death of millions of people to a fun time in a resort in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I say a Monte Carlo casino, I say it's reduced the suffering of the Jewish people, which I take very seriously. I know I'm sometimes accused nowadays of exploiting the suffering of my parents, but
Your parents were in death camps.
my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto from September 1939 to May 1943. My father was then taken to Auschwitz concentration camp. My mother was in Majdanek concentration camp, and they were there through the duration of the war. On both sides of my family, every single member was exterminated. I never had an aunt, I never had an uncle, I never had a grandparent. I didn't even have a concept of relatives. And nobody, I think, who knows me will deny that I was deeply invested in my parents' well-being and in their memory. And I think it is deeply offensive when organizations like the World Jewish Congress, the Jewish Claims Conference, when they use that suffering in order to extract monies, when they parade Holocaust survivors in front of cameras to extract monies. And then, after extracting the money, extorting the money, blackmailing the money, and then to inflict a new suffering on the survivors by denying them any of the monies that they have gotten. I mean, it's very difficult. It really is very difficult to conceive of any lower tactic than the one these organizations have engaged in.
I've met survivors.
So basically, in this interview, he's talking about this book that he wrote, which was called The Holocaust Industry. So he's basically saying that the Holocaust is getting used for two things. One, to make money, but then there's the actual Holocaust of, how to treat the victims well or the victims' families well. That's a separate thing. And yeah, I mean, his family went through it and he gets accused for all kinds of things because of his opinions are not convenient to some, and yeah, I mean, he speaks really well on a lot of things here. This interview, it was really interesting to watch. We'll see if there's an interesting point here, because I think that there is a certain personality trait that will be visible here. Let's see. But you could almost hear like the decider thing, like IPs will, and we're kind of gonna lean in that direction eventually, but IPs say things like, oh, if somebody knows me, like if you really know me, then you would know XYZ about me. It's something that observers who have the double deciding, they're not going to pull that line so much because it's not that important to get to know us. We always make it about the thing. But he is very personal with the way he talks, and that is kind of like the other IPs, but we're not trying to type too much just yet. Let's take a little bit more of a look.
But have you not lost any of the ambiguity or the ambivalence in your thesis? It seems that you had an idea and you gallop ahead and you gallop ahead, and some of the things you say, some of the terminology, did you refer to World Jewish Congress and Canadian Jewish Congress as hucksters and gangsters and thugs?
Hucksters, gangsters, thugs.
So I know some guys in the Canadian Jewish Congress, and we may agree or disagree. I don't see them as thugs and gangsters.
Well, maybe...
Couldn't you just say they were wrong?
No, I don't think this is a question of wrong. They were fully cognizant of what they were doing. They were fully knowledgeable that they were blackmailing the Swiss. There was no lack of knowledge on their part of what they were doing. They were not unknowledgeably hijacking the colossal suffering of the Jewish people in a shakedown racket. That was not done sleepwalking. They knew exactly what they were doing. Are you trying?
Yep. So that's how masculine tribe comes off generally. So that's it's hard to prove every single coin, so I'll try to get as many as possible. But masculine tribe, what happens is that when other people do things, it's very real to us, and so he's saying that, hey, these people are not sleepwalking, they're intentionally engaging in the behavior that they're engaging in. So yeah, that's masculine tribe. Yeah, so anyway, let's get to the next clip. We have a total of 6 clips today. This is number 3, back to Candace.
But now we're 2 years later. We're 2 years later. In the time that's elapsed, not 1, not 2, 3 Ivy League presidents were toppled. There's never been, I know the history of academic freedom in our country, I've written on it. There's never been anything like it. This massive assault. How was it conducted? It started with people like Bill Ackman, the billionaire. He threatens Harvard. You don't crush the encampments, you don't get alumni money. It was very, very straightforward. It was pure blackmail. And
which is, by the way, their favorite tactic. Financial blackmail comes first.
It was financial blackmail. If you look at the Harvard report on anti-Semitism, one Jewish alumni gave Harvard $200 million. One alumni gave Harvard $300 million. Ackman, $50 million. And then there was a petition organized. My memory is, but the number probably increased vastly. The original version of the petition, 1,200 Jewish alumni from Harvard threatened to withhold the alumni contributions. And so, systematically, these college presidents are being ousted. I can quote to you, but I can't tell you the source, but I could tell you, no.
Okay, so if he's an IP, is he more on the intuitive side or the sensing side? I can hear a little bit more category talk. I'm kind of left, being like, wow, I should have told the audience what this is about, because he's talking in more of these abstract layers. And so what he actually is talking about is the student protesters at these Ivy League institutions were causing a lot of commotion, at least people who are donating to these Ivy League colleges, universities, they were getting nervous. They're like, I don't want these student protesters around. And so what ended up happening is that 3 presidents of these Ivy League institutions, they got fired. They got let go, and it was a whole dramatic thing that was all over the news. And Norman Finkelstein here is talking about it. And but he's talking about it how? With sensory or intuition? I'm seeing a little bit more on the intuition side, but he may or may not have those in the middle. So we're going to get to clip number 4. And this one I'm actually going to set up. So this one is about going back and forth with intuition and sensing, I believe. Hopefully. Okay. I think that is what it is. Yeah. He's going to talk about a student that he had that basically he had to tell him how to balance the intuition and sensing. Let's see how he talks about that.
Security. And it's the same with the smugness. Bill Maher just nauseates me. He's like the Pillsbury doughboy with horn-rimmed glasses. I find him so unbearable. He's reciting the lines. He says, and he has to read. I thought you wrote those lines. You didn't write those lines. Your writers wrote those lines. That's why you have to read them, and you can't even read them correctly. But as I said, there is a problem. There were many problems with the wokeness, with the DEI. It stifled speech. It stifled the free flow of ideas, the classes, the reading lists. They were suffocating. I would just, because I don't like to speak in generalities, I think I was writing to somebody today, a student of mine, you're too much at the abstract. You have to go back and forth between the abstract and the concrete, okay? Otherwise, you lose the reader. So I'm going to give you two examples, concrete examples. One of them is the woke reading lists. It really irked me. I have students who have high aspirations, and they're excellent students. One of them, 2 years ago, it looked like he was going to go away for 40 years because of wrong place, wrong time, wrong people. The judge gave him a second chance. It's called the second chance. He asked me to be his mentor. I told him, what do you want to do? I asked him, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be a criminal lawyer, first-rate criminal lawyer, he said. I said, what are your majors? He said, business and psychology. I say, forget that. That's not going to happen.
Okay, basically it turns out all right, the story. I'm going to leave the video in the description and you can watch. But yeah, Norman Finkelstein, at least for typing purposes, we're seeing some double observing. That story with that kid turned out good. He ended up, doing really well. But yeah, Norman Finkelstein is, helping the students see the intuition, the abstract, and the concrete, the sensing. And this is something we all need to do, especially someone like me with sensing at the top and intuition at the bottom. Fourth, I need to, map my concrete data with the abstract categories. There's a number of improvements I can do on that front. But yeah, so moving forward, we're going to be looking at the next clip. So in clip number 5, this is going to be the debate, where Norman ended up not wanting to even be on this debate, but he ended up showing up. And let's see how it goes. He does bring up, I think he's going to bring up some Native Americans and kind of comparing that to what's going on now. And so that's a really good example of going back and forth with intuition and sensing. And I didn't talk about it much, but, I'm seeing that Norman has TI. So that's kind of what we want to see. We want to see you want to see whatever the type is, but, you might see some evidence for TI. You might see the SINE axis. These are some things, at least, that might be visible here, because he's very deliberate with the sensory words that he's using. Whereas me with SE, I'm very scattered with which physical words I'm using, how I'm describing things. I'm not being very specific with the language, the way SINE axis is doing.
Opposing the Euro-American manifest destiny in the history of our own country, because they understood it would be at their expense. It was inbuilt and inevitable. And so now, for you to come along and say that it all happened just because of the war, that otherwise the Zionists made all these plans for a happy minority to live there, that simply does not gel. It does not cohere. It is not reconcilable with what you yourself have written. It was inevitable and inbuilt. Now, in other situations, you've said that's true, but I think it was a greater good to establish a Jewish state at the expense of the indigenous population. That's another kind of argument. That was Theodore Roosevelt's argument in our own country. He said, we don't want the whole of North America to remain a squalid refuge for these wigwams and teepees. We have to get rid of them and make this a great country. But he didn't deny that it was inbuilt and inevitable.
I think you've made your point. First, I'll take up something that Muin said. He said that the Nakba was inevitable.
As have you.
And predictable. No. I've never said that. It was inevitable and predictable only because the Arabs assaulted the Jewish community and state in 1947-48. Had there been no assault, there probably wouldn't have been a refugee problem. There's no reason for a refugee problem to have occurred, expulsions to have occurred, dispossession.
All right. So it's a 4-hour debate. We're not going to watch it. I think that's enough. I'll leave it in the description. But the point of showing this clip was to see how is Norman using his language. Does it reflect the SINE axis where you're a bit more deliberate with the choice of words? NISE can be a little bit more deliberate, but it's just kind of like the INFJ rappers where it's more about the meaning. It's not about the sensory word exactly. It's not, there's a different kind of feel to it. But at the end of the day, it does look a bit like double observing, where he's trying to prove a pattern and he is able to bring up some facts to the debate, to the discussion. And yeah, this is a very long discussion between people who have written books about the matter. So yeah. Anyway, I mean, I didn't mention social type 3 that much. I did, but a little bit. But yeah, that's something to kind of see very clearly. But one of the effects of being a social type 3 is you're going to have a little bit of this melancholy effect. This, not in all cases, but sometimes when you look at things in a very detailed way, you can get very deep into problem spaces and things can end up very hopeless because and that's something that, Lex Friedman even tried to bring out in the previous debate, where he's like, can we say something good? And it's very difficult. But here in this interview, at least the clip that I'm going to show, where Norman is going to try to give some semblance of hope because he scared the other guy into, being very sad about things. And so this is going to be the last clip for this video. Let's see how Norman Finkelstein can handle hope. And how does he talk about it? Let's see.
So they're using genocidal means, but their objective remains to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And
I guess I wonder less about what Israel's plan is, because we know that. What does the world do? Does the world fall in line? Do they continue to, have a blind eye? Do they actually form a resistance coalition? What happens?
Well, I'll try to end on a hopeful note. Not because I want to deviate from the facts. The facts, whether they're hopeful or not hopeful, the facts are what's most important. But I still think there are hopeful signs. I would say one thing that actually surprised me, and maybe I'm so desperate to see something positive, there was the court decision on Mahmoud Khalil and the others. The judge his name is Young, I think, and he was a Reagan appointee. He was so tough on Trump. He said that they're terrorizing people who trying to exercise their free speech. And he says, why can't they exercise their rights of speech, but a much bigger group who are pro-Israel get to exercise their rights? He said, why was ICE putting on the masks He said they look like the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
Yeah, he was tough. And
That gives you hope.
is there any grounds for hope? Obviously, it's a fair question. First of all, we have to, in my opinion, we have to start from the basics. There's no silver lining in a genocide. Even this Trump plan was just totally detached from reality. We want the people.
Right. Yeah, and you see this little observer issue. Yeah, this channel is funded in whole or in part by the Qatari government. That's setting off my observer side. It's oh man, that's so messed up that they have to put like all these labels on these things because the United States is funding all kinds of shady things, and now they have to put a label on the Qatari government. Yeah, gotta go any for a second and complain about labels. But yeah, let's talk about Norman and his hope. So he was able to be hopeful in that instance because he was seeing something. I would say he was starting to see someone do something in reality that gave him hope. Someone who is a judge who made the right decision and is actually seeing things clearly. Because in his world, he's seeing a lot of patterns and things, but people aren't taking it seriously, and when people are actually catching on to what he's saying, he is able to have some hope. And yeah, that's something good to end on. But you see how quickly he just slips back in to the melancholy and, there's no silver lining in a genocide. That is true. But you can see that, we have different archetypes for a reason, that certain people are able to hold the line when things are bad and, leave it to the social threes to call out things. That's why so many are reporters and journalists and academics, because they're able to diagnose the problem. And that is honestly such an important thing. I've learned a lot from Norman Finkelstein. I couldn't share it all in one video, but there's a lot of great stuff that he talks about. I hope I didn't butcher everything completely, but this video is mainly to type him, not really to talk about his points as much. But he's a very good source of knowledge, and he's able to speak truth to power. So yeah, narrowing down the guess. So as you can tell, I was seeing TI. And yeah, we're seeing consume and sleep. How do you know that? Basically, he is taking in a lot of information and he's reviewing it. He's processing all this information. And when someone else doesn't do the homework, he's like, why are you here? He's going to call you a thing. Destiny is over here on the consume, play, blast side. So that is not his type. So we can eliminate those. He's definitely way more processed, and he doesn't really want to debate people who are not processed on the issue he's debating on. Yeah, and I mean that is honestly a really great lesson. If you're working in a certain area, you better be processed in what you're talking about, rather than pulling things up, willy-nilly. And there are multiple ways to do things, but I understand where he's coming from. Let's leave it at that. But in the next round of elimination, what else are we seeing? We're seeing some double observing, so we can go with decider. But how about info and energy? Is he more energy balanced, or is he more calm with the information, doing both consume and blast? Yeah, so I guess that he's more info on the info side. And yeah, I'm seeing decider, although I did consider, the observer version of what I'm going to guess. But yeah. And then as far as modalities goes, that's going to be a little bit of a guess, but I definitely was seeing masculine tribe. He was referring to people as gangsters and thugs. He's, calling people out, and he's very comfortable staying with a conclusion on what someone else outside of himself is, which is more your masculine tribe and feminine identity. So you're soft on yourself, but you're hard on others. you know, and yeah, both number 1s and 3s have that a little bit. So my final guess is FMTINE, consume, sleep, blast, play last, number 3. So that is a standard INTP. I did consider double masculine for a very long time. That's possible. Now, I think he's a little too smooth for that, so I kind of changed it in the last minute to FM, but I really don't know. It could be FM, it could be MM. I don't know, but I'm definitely seeing masculine FE demon, or a lower level of that extroverted feeling. So what does this mean? I mean, he is kind of holding the line on, you know, politics, political science. He's a political scientist. He's reading all the books. He's taking in all the latest work on it, and he's analyzing stuff. He, I think, participates in protest and activism. Yeah, he's very tuned in, and he's a great source of knowledge to learn from, because he's looking at everything. He's looking at people from, you know, all sides of the spectrum on this issue. And his own, you know, family went through the Holocaust, and he's able to talk about, you know, the genocide in Gaza authoritatively, which is hard for many people to do. But he's doing a good job with it. So yeah, that's I recommend people watch his stuff. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be typing someone we looked at, Briahna Joy Gray. We're going to be typing Briahna Joy Gray in 2 weeks, a political commentator and lawyer, and I think a consultant, some other things. And then Sabrina Salvati in 4 weeks. These are both podcasters. You know, they have their own podcast, and they have so many other, you know, credentials. I don't know what else, but basically it's like political commentator, political commentary, and it's really well done. They interview a bunch of people. Briahna does on her channel, and it's called Bad Faith. But you know, as I'm learning about different events, different current events, it's good to have someone who kind of has the right head on their shoulders, you know, and they're able to speak intelligently about the issues and what's going on. And I found Briahna to be pretty easy to watch, and you know, it's okay. So we're gonna type her in 2 weeks, and she's had some really good interviews with Norman Finkelstein and a bunch of other people. So you might see her around. Anyway, I am still sick. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you can. Thank you to people who have already subscribed. I hope you have a wonderful day.